I didn't take the archivist job because I loved history or books. I took it because I needed quiet. The basement of the university library promised me silence, and after the chaos in my life, silence felt like safety. Down there, it was just me. Tall grey shelves, boxes full of old papers, and the buzz of fluorescent lights overhead. Most of the staff stayed upstairs where the windows were. I didn't mind. I preferred being alone. The first week was simple. I sorted old files, labeled boxes, and shelved forgotten magazines. But on Friday, something strange happened. A typewriter sat in the far corner, covered by a yellowed plastic sheet. Nobody used it anymore, and it wasn't plugged in. Still, as I sat with a flashlight during a power outage, I heard it. One sharp ding, like the sound of a carriage return. Then a single key clicked. I turned the light on it, and the sheet had been pulled back. One key was pressed down, the letter A. I told myself it was nothing, metal shifting maybe. But when I came back Monday morning, a piece of paper was rolled into the machine. At the top was one word, typed in faded black ink, me. My stomach dropped. I pulled the sheet out, crumpled it, and shoved it in the trash. But when I opened my desk drawer a minute later, the same paper was lying inside, smooth and flat again, the word staring up at me. That night, I dreamed of fingers made of wires reaching through the typewriter keys, waiting to type more. The next day, I found a key on the desk. Not a computer key, an old brass key on a string, heavy and worn down with age. Attached to it was a tag with a call number written in fading ink. I searched the catalog. Nothing matched. I searched the shelves. The spot was empty. Still, when I slipped the key into my pocket, the basement air shifted as if something there had been waiting for me to pick it up. The typewriter gave a single clack, like it approved. That night, I noticed a book on a top shelf that hadn't been there before. It was large, black, and bound in cloth. No label, no barcode. I pulled it down. Inside were pages neatly filled with names, each one followed by a date. Some names were professors, some were janitors. A few I recognized from portraits upstairs. The dates weren't birthdays or deaths. They felt more like entries, like the day those people were taken. I flipped to the last page. It was blank, except for a faint line waiting for someone to write their name. When I closed the book, the typewriter dinged again. I wanted to leave right then, but I didn't. That's the part that still bothers me. I could have put the ledger back on the shelf and walked out. Instead, I carried it to my desk like it belonged there. The typewriter sat beside it, waiting. When I opened the ledger again, the pages felt warm. I ran my finger down the list of names, stopping at one I recognized, a professor who had gone missing years ago. The date beside it matched the day he vanished. My throat went dry. The typewriter gave a loud clack. Another sheet had rolled into place, though I hadn't touched it. The keys started striking by themselves, metal hammering ink into paper. One name, then another. Each matched perfectly to the entries in the book. When the machine finished, it dinged and slid back, as if it wanted me to continue. I didn't move. I just stared at it, frozen. The brass key in my pocket grew warmer, almost hot. I pulled it out and held it in my palm. The typewriter hit the space bar once, twice, like a nod. I shoved the ledger shut and stuffed the key back in my pocket. I didn't want to play this game, but when I tried to leave, the stairwell door wouldn't open. My phone had no signal. The basement was locked tight, holding me in. The clacking began again, louder this time. The typewriter slammed letters into the paper over and over, typing the same word again and again. Me, me, me. I shouted, "Stop!" My voice echoed off the shelves. To my surprise, the keys froze. The basement went silent. I thought that was the end, but when I looked at the paper, the word "now" had appeared under all the others. I didn't know what it wanted. I only knew I couldn't leave until it got it. I held the brass key and looked around the basement for a lock it might fit. Most cabinets were padlocked or rusted. One metal drawer at the very back had a keyhole that looked almost right. I tried it. The key turned as if it had been waiting only for that motion. The drawer slid open without a sound. Inside was not paper. It held another typewriter, the same old make as the first one, already loaded with a blank sheet. No cord, no dust. It looked ready. When I touched the frame, the keys twitched under my fingers. A single word rose on the page, one letter at a time. You. I stepped back. The other typewriter on my desk clacked once, as if calling me. The lights flickered. I felt that tight pressure in the room, the feeling you get right before a thunderstorm. I didn't want to touch either machine. I didn't want to touch the ledger, but the stairwell door still wouldn't open. I was not leaving. "Fine," I said. "What do you want?" The desk machine rolled a fresh sheet and typed one steady word: count. I looked at the shelves. Boxes with faded labels stared back. I read the first label out loud, then the second, then a third. As I spoke, the buzz in the light softened. The air relaxed. Every time I paused, the typewriter tapped the spacebar in a slow, patient rhythm, like a metronome. I kept going, shelf by shelf, box by box. It took a long time. When I finished the last row, the machine dinged, then typed a single period. The stairwell door clicked. It would open now. I could have left. I almost did. My hand went to the knob, but the ledger on the desk had opened on its own. The last page wasn't blank anymore. A faint line of indentations had appeared where a name should go, like someone had pressed hard without ink. My name fit that length too well. I closed the book and left that night. When I reached the street, my phone woke up, full bars, like nothing had happened. I didn't sleep much. In my head, I heard the word count over and over, as steady as the tick of the wall clock in the basement. The next day I told myself I had imagined it. I went back anyway. The key was in my pocket before I realized I had picked it up. The basement was colder. The desk typewriter had a page ready. 3 words stood at the top in clean black letters. Count, shelve, keep. "I'm not your employee," I said, but my voice sounded weak. I shelved a cart of journals that had been waiting for weeks. I spoke the titles as I slid each volume into place. The lights brightened. The hum evened out. The air warmed by a degree I could feel on my skin. The second machine in the back started up. It typed a name I knew, one of the older professors who had gone missing 10 years earlier. Then a date. The date matched the day he disappeared. I checked the ledger. His name and date were there too, written in the same neat hand. The page felt warm where it said his name, as if the paper remembered him. I tried something. I said his name out loud, simple and clear. The desk machine answered with a soft clack, like a quiet yes. The feeling that followed was strange. It wasn't fear. It was closer to relief. The way a room feels when everything is finally in order. That was the first week. By the second week, the routine had grabbed me. In the morning, I unlocked the basement. I greeted the machines. I did the count. I read labels out loud. I shelved carefully. When I made mistakes, the typewriter clicked its spacebar at me until I fixed them. When I did well, it dinged once like a bell at the end of class. The ledger stayed open on my desk. I didn't write in it. It wrote by itself. New names appeared in the neat hand I had come to recognize. Old dates, sometimes new ones. The brass key warmed whenever a page turned. I didn't tell anyone. How would I explain it? The archive is alive. It needs rules followed. It sounded foolish in my head. Still, I started to feel calmer downstairs than anywhere else on campus. The basement was strict, but it was honest. Do the work, say the names, keep the order, and the place will let you breathe. One afternoon, the head librarian came down without warning. She smiled at me, ready to ask something routine. Then she saw the ledger open, saw the typewriter twitch and went still. Color drained from her face for a second. I thought she would ask me to explain. She didn't. She whispered, "So it's you now," and left without waiting for my answer. Her name showed up in the ledger the next morning with a date that had not yet happened. The paper under her name was warm. I did not touch that line. Sometimes the basement wanted more than count and shelve. It wanted names spoken. I began to understand that part. Some days I would feel a pull toward a certain cabinet. When I opened it, the typewriter would type a name and a year, and I would speak that name out loud in the quiet. The room would settle like a deep breath. It felt less like a haunting and more like a roll call for the forgotten. Then came the storm that changed everything. A wide grey wall of rain moved over campus in the late afternoon. The building shook with wind. By closing time, the power went out across half the city. The upstairs librarians locked the doors and left. I stayed. I didn't think about it. I just did. It felt wrong to leave the basement dark and alone. Downstairs, the fluorescents should have died. They didn't. They grew brighter, humming hard, almost musical. The desk typewriter began to type fast, faster than any hand could. Pages poured out, names, dates, places. The second machine joined in, then a third from some cabinet I had never opened. The sound filled the room like heavy rain on a roof. The ledger flipped on its own, page after page, as if someone was turning them with quick, sure hands. I couldn't keep up. I stood in the middle of it all and watched the archive write itself alive. When the machines stopped, the silence rang. The desk typewriter rolled a fresh sheet and typed my name, just my name. Then it added a single word beneath it, keeper. The brass key in my pocket burned so hot I had to put it on the desk. I stared at the word. I waited for anger or fear. What I felt was a steady, heavy acceptance, the kind that does not ask your permission. "I can't sign anything," I said. My voice shook. The machine didn't answer with words. Instead, it typed count again, then shelf, then keep. The stairwell door clicked. It was open for me if I wanted to go. I went home. The storm had passed. Streets were shiny and empty. I slept harder than I had in months and dreamed of drawers sliding open and closing on time. The next morning, my phone had 3 missed calls from the head librarian and 1 short message, "Please see me." Her office was empty when I went upstairs. A folded note sat on her chair. Keys downstairs. That was all. I checked the ledger after. Her name glowed faintly with last night's date. I put the note under the book's cover like a bookmark for something finished. Days became steady. I didn't call what I did magic. It wasn't. It was care. I did the inventory. I spoke the names. I kept the place clean and in order. The machines asked less often. When they did, it was clear. Count, name, keep. When I left on time, the stairwell door stayed smooth under my hand. When I skipped a label or put a box slightly wrong, the space bar tapped until I fixed it. I learned the rhythm of the room. The basement learned me. A few weeks later, a student came downstairs looking for an old yearbook. He stopped at the bottom step and went quiet, like people do when they walk into a church mid-service. He smiled at me, nervous. "It feels full in here," he said. "It's a good collection," I told him. And it was. I helped him find the book. On the way out, he paused at the desk and touched the ledger without opening it. He flinched like he had touched warm glass. "Weird," he said. "Feels like someone left a lamp on." "Some things hold heat," I said. He nodded like he wanted to agree. He left quickly. The machines typed his name after the door closed. I said it out loud, clear and steady. The room calmed. I did not check the ledger. I didn't have to. The last change came quietly. I unlocked the basement one morning and found a third word added to the usual instructions, typed at the top of the day's first page, present. It wasn't a command. It felt like a call and response. I spoke into the quiet. "I'm here." The typewriter dinged once. The ledger's paper warmed under my palm. The lights hummed in a calm way I hadn't heard before. Now this is how it goes. I come in early. I say, "I'm here," the way a person checks in at a desk. I do the count. I shelf with care. I speak the names that rise. The archive keeps time around me. Some days the machines don't type at all. We work in an honest quiet. Other days I am busy with lists and labels and a page or two pulled gently forward by an invisible hand. I used to think a haunting had to mean fear and running. But what I have isn't that. It is a keeping. It is strict, but it is fair. It asks what any good library asks. Know what you hold, say what it is, and put it where it belongs. At night, if I pass the building on my way home, I look at the dark windows and picture the rows below my feet. I know the machines are resting. I know the ledger is warm. Sometimes, if the street is empty, I whisper toward the bricks, "I'll be back in the morning." I always am. When I lock up at the end of each day, I touch the brass key and the book one last time. The key is never hot now. It's just warm, like a hand that has been holding yours. I turn off the lights. The stairwell door opens without a sound. As I climb, I hear only one thing, soft and steady, in the room behind me, as sure as the tick of the clock on the wall. Present, and it always answers back. That's the strangest part. When I say present, I hear the typewriter's ding or the shuffle of a page in the ledger or a faint tap on the cabinet door, like the archive itself marking me down. It isn't loud. It isn't frightening. It's steady, like a teacher calling out a name and hearing the voice that proves no one has been lost. The work has become natural to me now. I don't look at the clock anymore when 2 hours pass or 5 or a whole day. I only know when it's time to leave because the stairwell door clicks. If it doesn't, I wait until the machines tell me I've finished. I don't argue with that rhythm. It feels wrong to push against it. Sometimes I wonder what would happen if I didn't show up, if I overslept, or if I chose not to unlock the basement. But the thought doesn't sit well in my stomach. I know the roll would still be called. The ledger would still warm under a name, maybe without me speaking it. I'm not sure if it would punish me or simply replace me. Neither thought feels good, so I don't test it. I arrive each morning, and I leave only when I'm released. The brass key stays in my pocket. I've stopped trying to use it anywhere else. It isn't for cabinets or drawers, it's for me. It marks me as the one who belongs down there, the one who turns the silence into order. When I touch it, I feel calm, like even if the rest of the world forgets me, the archive won't. At night, I still get the calls. 3 times, always at the same minute, my phone buzzes. When I answer, there are no words, only the sound of keys striking, steady, measured. I used to be afraid of it. Now I listen until the line goes dead. I treat it like a lullaby, a reminder that somewhere beneath the campus, everything is in its place. I know this isn't normal. I know if I told anyone, they'd think I was broken from too much solitude. But I also know the difference between madness and duty. The ledger doesn't lie. The names are there. The dates are there. And when I speak them, when I count the shelves, when I shelve with care, the whole room exhales like it has been waiting to be seen. That's enough for me. Because some people live their lives trying not to be forgotten. Me, I have already been written down. I am already kept. And every morning when I arrive, every night when I whisper back to the dark, the answer is the same. Present. I didn't want to move into the dorm, but free rent is free rent. And I couldn't afford an apartment in the city. The building was old, a leftover from when the university had been a boarding school. Brick walls, tall windows, and hallways that stretched forever. Most of it was empty. Only a handful of graduate assistants lived there now. My floor was deserted. Dozens of rooms, all locked, all silent. My room was at the very end of the hall. The first night I dragged a mattress inside, shut the door, and told myself the silence would be good for me. But silence wasn't what I got. At 2 in the morning, I woke to the sound of a voice. It was clear, steady, like a teacher reading names from a list. Henderson. Then a pause. Miller. Another pause. Jameson. My chest tightened. I sat up in the dark, listening. After each name, I heard the faint scrape of a pencil on paper, like attendance being marked. Then the voice called, "Here." My blood ran cold because it wasn't my voice, but it came from just outside my door. The next night it happened again. Same time. More names. After each one, a shuffle, a scratch, an answer. Then, at the end, my own last name. I froze, heart hammering. The silence stretched so long it hurt. Then, from the row of lockers lining the hall, a single door banged shut hard enough to echo down the corridor. By the 3rd night, I knew I had to answer. When the voice called my name, I whispered, "Here." The hall went quiet. The lockers shut one by one, neat and orderly. The air relaxed and I realized it had been waiting for me. After that, I answered every night. The first week, I told myself it was nothing. Old pipes, maybe. Echoes carrying through the halls of a building too empty for its own good. But I couldn't ignore the way the ritual grew sharper each night. The names came in the same order. The pauses were exact. And every time my name came last, the air waited until I said, "Here." If I hesitated, the silence pressed down heavy, like a hand on my chest. One night, I decided to test it. I stayed in bed and kept quiet. The voice called the names as usual. Henderson, Miller, Jameson, each one answered by some breath or whisper. Then my name. I clenched my teeth and stayed silent. The lockers exploded all at once, doors slamming open, metal clanging so loud it shook the walls. My lamp sparked, books flew from the desk, my mattress jolted like someone had kicked it from underneath. My name boomed again, stretched and angry. I gasped and shouted, "Here!" Everything stopped instantly. The lockers slammed shut in one clean line, left to right like dominoes. My lamp flickered back on. The silence that followed was almost smug, like the building had won. After that, I never missed again. I stood in the hall at 2 a.m, bare feet on cold tile, waiting for my turn. When the voice called my name, I answered. And each night, the relief in the air was almost physical, like a crowd satisfied that I'd shown up. I started to notice other things too. Chalk appeared on the blackboard outside my room, written in a slanted hand I didn't recognize. Quiet in the halls, lights out at 9, roll call mandatory. My clothes sometimes moved from my dresser to the lockers, folded neatly as if waiting for inspection. When I opened those lockers, whispers spilled out, fast, breathy, like gossip, but I could never make out the words. The dorm was alive, and it wanted order. By October, I had given in to the routine. I went about my days like normal, but when midnight came, my body grew tense. At 1:30, I was already awake. At 2, I stood in the hall, waiting. The voice read the names: Henderson, Miller, Jameson, dozens more, and then mine, always last, always waiting. One night the voice stuttered. It paused in the middle of the list as if it had forgotten. Then it said my name, not at the end, but right at the beginning. The silence after was heavy. My throat closed up. I felt something behind me, dozens of breaths leaning close. The chalk warmed in my hand. I raised it to the board without thinking. I wrote the first name I knew, Henderson. My mouth spoke it as I wrote. From down the hall came the muffled answer. Here. Then Miller. Here. Jameson. Here. The list unrolled in my mind like a scroll I hadn't known I carried. I read each name, one by one, pacing the hall. Each was answered from behind a locked door or a rusted locker. When I reached my own name, I whispered it, and the reply came back. Not from me, but from every voice at once, a thunder of "here" that bent the metal in the lockers. That was the night I understood. The roll call was mine now. From that night forward, the old voice never returned. At 2 a.m, the silence would thicken and the names would fill my head. I spoke them without needing to see a list. Each one was answered. The lockers rattled shut in approval. The air calmed, and I knew my job was done. At first, I thought the names belonged only to the past, students from long ago. But then I recognized one. It was a boy in my seminar, someone I had talked to that very afternoon. I hesitated. The name pressed at the back of my teeth, heavy and insistent. Finally, I whispered it. A voice answered, "Here," from a door halfway down the hall. The room was locked. It had been locked for years, yet the sound was real, steady, and certain. The next night, 2 more names I knew appeared. A professor, the woman who worked at the coffee shop, both answered from doors that should have been empty. The list was no longer a memory. It was a net, pulling in the living one by one. I tried refusing. I left the hall early, heart racing, hoping the role would go on without me. It didn't. The silence followed me down the stairwell like a thick fog. Lockers above me banged open and shut, echoing like gunfire. Voices screamed, absent, 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 until the walls shook. I ran back up, sweating, grabbed the chalk and shouted the names as fast as I could. Only when the last voice answered did the hall go still. After that, I didn't try again. The blackboard outside my door filled itself now. Not just a handful of names, but whole rosters, long columns with neat check marks. When I erased them in the morning, they bled through stronger, darker, as if the board itself remembered. The dawn began to change too. The air smelled like chalk and sweat, sharp and old. I heard chairs scrape inside the locked rooms, the sound of pens tapping, papers being shuffled. The faint ring of a class bell echoed in the vents, though no one else seemed to notice. The building was waking up, becoming what it once was, a school that never dismissed. I thought about leaving. I thought about breaking the lease and finding another place. But the thought didn't stick. Every time I pictured walking away, my chest tightened. The list would still come at 2 a.m. The voices would still wait. And if I wasn't there to answer, the punishment would fall harder. I knew it, so I stayed. By November, I didn't need chalk. The names wrote themselves across the blackboard. I only had to read them. My voice grew stronger, steadier, like I had done this all my life. And the silence that followed each roll call felt almost like respect. A crowd acknowledging the one who kept order. But deep down, I knew the truth. This wasn't respect. It was ownership. It happened in the middle of winter. Snow pressed against the windows, muffling the world outside. At 2 a.m., sharp, the silence thickened, and I began reading the names as always. Henderson, Miller, Jameson. One after another, voices answered from the locked rooms. Then I stopped. My own name was next, not at the end like usual. In the middle, I froze. The chalk burned warm in my hand. My throat was dry. The air behind me swelled with breath, dozens of lungs waiting. I whispered my name, soft as I could. The answer came back not from one door, but from all of them at once. Every locker, every room, 100 voices shouting "here" in unison. The sound bent the walls, rattled the ceiling tiles, made the floor shudder under my feet. When it stopped, the board outside my door filled on its own. Not just names anymore, but rules. Lights out at 9. Roll call mandatory. Absence not allowed. Prefect on duty. The word prefect was underlined 3 times. From that night, I wasn't just another name. I was the one in charge of the list. The chalk moved in my hand before the names even formed in my mind. I paced the hall like a teacher, calling them out with steady steps. And the voices answered, always present, always waiting. Sometimes new names appeared, people I'd seen earlier that day, a student laughing on the quad, a professor on his way to class. By night, their voices joined the roll, speaking from behind doors that hadn't opened in decades. The dawn wasn't just keeping the dead, it was recruiting the living. I understood then that there would be no graduation, no end to the semester. The school would never empty, the roll would never stop, and as long as I held the chalk, I was the one who had to make sure of it. By spring, the routine no longer felt like a burden. It felt like breathing. I didn't need to wait for the silence to thicken anymore. At 2 a.m. sharp, my eyes opened. My feet carried me to the hall, and the chalk was already warm in my hand. The names poured from my mouth without hesitation, steady and certain, and the answers came back one after another. I didn't question where the voices came from, or how the rooms filled when the doors were locked. I didn't ask how the living could answer from places they had never been. I only knew the rule. Everyone must be present, and if I faltered, the dorm would remind me what absence cost. The hall changed more each week. Lockers gleamed as if freshly polished. The smell of chalk and floor wax never faded. Once I walked past a window and saw dozens of faces staring out into the night. Faces I didn't know. Faces that vanished when I blinked. The building was no longer just a place to sleep. It was a school again. A school with no vacations, no graduations, no end of term. One night, after the last name was called, I found a clipboard on the floor outside my door. My handwriting filled the sheet, columns of names with perfect check marks beside each one. At the bottom was my own name twice, one marked, one blank. I understood. The second box was waiting. I should have been afraid, but I wasn't. There was a strange comfort in the order of it all. No one forgotten, no one excused. The list would always be complete, and I would always be the one to keep it. Until the day came when the blank beside my own name had to be filled. Until then, I keep the chalk close. I keep my voice ready. At 2 a.m., I step into the hall and call each name, one by one, and the answers rise from every locker, every room, every shadowed corner of the dorm. Present. That word is my duty now, my purpose, my curse, my gift, because in this place, absence is not allowed, and I am always, always present. I took the night guard job at the museum because it paid better than stocking shelves, and the hours meant I could avoid people. The building was old, a brick box with a stone staircase and a brass plaque out front that caught the street lights. Inside, the air smelled like dust and floor polish. The galleries were small but crowded. Glass cases with fragile things, paintings in heavy frames, a tall display of tools from the old mill, a room full of local school trophies, a diorama with a taxidermy fox that always looked surprised. My shift started at 10 and ended at 6. The manager said, "Walk the route every hour, check the doors, don't touch the cases. If an alarm chirps, call me." He gave me a ring of keys that felt too heavy for how little there was to see. I did the first round slow, getting used to the creaks. The lights hummed softly. The exit signs gave the halls a low red glow. The only sound was my footsteps and the soft click of my clocking device when I tapped each checkpoint. At midnight, I stood at the front desk and listened to the building breathe. That's when I heard the speaker pop. The old ceiling speakers were supposed to be dead. The museum stopped using the PA system years ago. Still, a voice came through, distant and thin, like an old recording. "Good evening, patrons. The museum is now closed. Please proceed to the exit." The words echoed through the empty rooms. I waited for the rest of the message. It didn't come. The speaker clicked off. The hair on my arms lifted. I did the next round faster. In the mill room, one of the rope barriers had moved 6 inches. The brass stand turned just enough to change the path. In the trophy room, a ribbon lay in the middle of the floor, blue side up, even though I had seen it pinned behind glass an hour earlier. I stood looking at the case. The ribbon was still there too, pinned neat. So how was it also on the floor? I didn't touch it. I finished the round and told myself the building was settling. At 1, the speakers clicked again. Same voice. Good evening, patrons. The museum is now closed. Please proceed to the exit. I said out loud, there's no one here. Because sometimes saying a thing helps. Something tapped the glass behind me. I turned. A small placard in the local history room had slid down inside its holder. The title read, Night Attendant, on loan. There was no card like that on my earlier round. I lifted the holder. The card slid back up on its own. I set it down and walked away because I didn't know what else to do. At 2, I found the first note. It was a narrow strip of cardstock on the information desk, same paper the museum used for labels. In clean, old-fashioned letters, it said, Inventory. I turned it over. On the back was a list of rooms in order, with blank lines beside each one. Gallery A, Gallery B, Mill Room, Trophy Room, Children's Corner, Front Hall. I didn't want to play along, but when I stood still, the air felt wrong, like the moment before a storm. I took the pencil from the drawer. I walked the route again and said the names of the rooms out loud. Gallery A, clear. Gallery B, clear. Mill Room, clear. Trophy Room, clear. Children's Corner, clear. Front Hall, clear. When I spoke, the pressure eased. The light seemed to steady. The pencil felt warmer in my hand. I checked off each blank. At the end of the list, a new line had appeared in faint letters, as if pressed from the other side. Night Attendant, present. I hesitated, then wrote, present. The speaker popped. Thank you for visiting. The voice sounded satisfied. I slept badly the next day. In my dreams, I saw tiny tags hanging from everything in my apartment. Lamp, donated. Couch, worn. Me, on loan. When I went back that night, the list was waiting. This time, inventory was not enough. The back of the card said, Align labels. I walked to Gallery A. Half the labels under the objects were tilted, not much, just a few degrees. I straightened one with 2 fingers. As soon as it was level, the hum in the light softened. I moved down the row, fixing each one. In Gallery B, the frames were off by a finger's width. I centered each painting. In the mill room, the rope barrier had shifted again. I reset it to the taped square on the floor. The more I corrected, the calmer the building felt. I started to understand. It wasn't bothering me for fun. It wanted the rules kept. It wanted order. At 3, the PA played a longer message. Good evening, patrons. The museum is now closed. Please proceed to the exit. Do not touch the exhibits. Return audio guides to the front desk. Thank you for your visit. I stood under the speaker and listened. It sounded like a person from 50 years ago. When the recording clicked off, a stack of folded brochures fell onto the floor from the rack as if someone had tugged one too hard. I bent to pick them up. A small white tag slid out. It said, Lost and Found. On the back, someone had written, in the same careful script, Speak the names. I didn't know what names it meant. I carried the tag to the front hall. On the counter was a wooden box labeled Lost and Found with a glass lid. Inside sat a glove, a child's plastic bracelet, an old brass key, a cufflink, a folded photo. I opened the box and picked up the photo. It showed a school group in the trophy room years ago, all smiles, all blurry. On the back, names were written in pencil. Henderson, Miller, Jameson, and a dozen more. I read the first name out loud because I didn't know what else to do. The speaker clicked softly like a small breath. I read the next. The air warmed. I finished the list. The tap on the glass behind me was gentle, like a finger saying thank you. After that, every night had a task. Sometimes the labels were off. Sometimes the rope barrier had to be moved back to its mark. Sometimes a door had to be locked a second time. Sometimes I had to read names from a program booklet or a donor plaque or a line of faded captions under a photograph. Each time I said a name, the building seemed to relax, as if it had been waiting to be seen and remembered. I stopped turning on my radio. I listened for the tiny changes in the hum. I learned the place like a person learns a body. A week in, I found a second placard, same as the first. It waited on the bench in the children's corner. Night attendant, docent. I didn't like it. I turned the card face down. Somewhere in the hall, a small bell rang, the old kind a teacher would use. The card had flipped itself back over when I looked again. Not funny, I said. The speaker clicked. Please proceed to the exit. I said, there is no one here. And the reply that came through the static sounded like, we are. I began to see small changes I couldn't explain away. A doll in the children's corner that had faced the window now looked toward the door. A black and white photo in Gallery B that had shown 5 women now showed 6. The new face just at the edge, not smiling. In the mill room, the wooden handle on the grain scoop felt warm when I checked the case, as if a hand had just held it. I kept moving. I did the list. I said the names. The building stayed calm. On a Thursday, the manager called at 9 and said, I'll be in late. There's a leak in the back office ceiling. If an alarm sounds, silence it and tape a note for me. He arrived after midnight, tired and wet. He handed me a stack of fresh labels he had printed to replace some with yellowed edges. Swap these when you can, he said. When he left, I looked at one. The font was clean. The paper was too bright. In Gallery A, I slid one new label into a holder. The hum in the light sharpened. The new paper looked wrong under the old glass. I pulled it back out. The hum softened. I put the old yellowed label back. The speaker clicked once, soft, like a nod. I taped a note to the manager's door that said, "Will replace, slowly." The next night, the manager's reply waited on the front desk. It was written in my own handwriting, though I hadn't written it. Okay. I was careful after that. I straightened. I dusted around things without touching them. I replaced labels only when the old paper flaked, and even then I carried the old piece to the lost and found box and put it in carefully, as if returning a borrowed book. The PA system began to use other phrases. Guided tour begins in 5 minutes. Please stay behind the line. Photography without flash only. Sometimes it said no flash in a tone that sounded like a warning directly to me, even when I wasn't holding a camera. Once, as a test I shouldn't have done, I stood too close to a brass telescope in a case and breathed on the glass. The speaker crackled and said, "Do not touch the exhibits." I stepped back. "Sorry," I said. The glass cleared on its own. I learned which hours were worst. 2 a.m. was busy with small tasks. 3 was for names. At 4, the building grew quiet in a deep way I can't explain, like a sleeping animal. At 5, the hum shifted toward morning. Those rhythms comforted me. Then the storm came. It rolled over the city after midnight, hard rain and low thunder that turned the street outside into a dark river. The lights flickered. Half the block lost power. The museum stayed on for a minute longer, humming deep, then went dark too. The exit signs glowed red. The glass cases were black mirrors. The speaker popped once and died. The silence felt heavy. The list card on the front desk glowed faintly, pale in the exit sign's light. New task, it said. The back read, keep. The millroom alarm chirped. I went there first because alarms are what you answer. The rope barrier had shifted far out of place, blocking the path backward instead of forward. I lifted it and set it back. The alarm stopped. In Gallery B, a frame sat crooked by more than a finger. I centered it. The air eased. In the children's corner, the doll had fallen. I picked it up and faced it toward the door. The pressure in the room dropped. The lost and found box rattled. I opened it. Inside, the brass key lay on top of the glove. The tag beside it read, Cases. I took the key and walked to a case in Gallery A that had never opened for me before. The lock turned smoothly. I didn't lift the lid. I only pressed it until the latch reset. The seal sat tight against the glass. I locked it again. The building exhaled. The storm hit the roof hard. Water pattered somewhere in the back. I checked the office. A slow drip fell into a bucket. The floor was dry. I moved a sign in front of the wet spot that read, Watch your step. There was no one to watch their step. It still felt right. When I reached the front desk, the PA clicked alive on whatever power it could scrape from the emergency circuits. The voice was softer this time, but clearer. Good evening, patrons. The museum is now closed. Please proceed to the exit. Return audio guides. Do not touch the exhibits. Thank you for your visit. The front doors rattled gently as the wind pushed. I checked the locks. They were firm. The red exit glow made the glass look like a dark lake. Something moved in that reflection. For a moment, I thought I saw a line of people behind me in the front hall, waiting to leave, hands folded, faces turned toward the doors. I turned around. The hall was empty. I faced the glass again. The reflections were gone. I stood at the desk and said in a voice I didn't plan, Thank you for visiting. See you next time. The speakers did not reply, but the room felt better. The storm passed just before 5. The power came back in a wave. The lights hummed. The cameras clicked as they woke. The PA announced, Guided tour begins in 5 minutes, and I laughed because there was no one to guide. On the counter sat a new placard. Night attendant, keep her. I didn't flip it. I let it lie there, face up. When the manager came in at 6, he whistled at the weather, hung his wet jacket and said, You hear the power blink? I said, I stayed. He smiled like he didn't understand what that meant and poured coffee. Anything weird? He asked. I said, labels are sensitive to changes. I left a note. He nodded as if I had told him the time. He went to his office. On his door, my note still hung. Will replace, slowly. Under it, in his handwriting that now looked exactly like mine, someone had added, Thank you. After that, I didn't fight the night. I arrived 10 minutes early and walked once through the rooms before I turned on all the lights, like a person checking on sleeping children. I picked up the list card and waited to see what the task would be. Inventory, align, names, keep. I did it in order. I learned to expect small things out of place, and I learned that when I put them right, the room felt safe again. Sometimes the PA would play an old announcement I hadn't heard before. Please do not cross the rope. Stay with your docent. Hands behind your back, please. Once it said, no flash, so loud it startled me, even though I had no camera. I said, okay, to the empty room and felt foolish and felt better anyway. The names were the part that mattered most. I used to think reading them was strange. Now it felt like cleaning something delicate. A donor plaque, a faded caption, a handwritten list tied to a quilt. Each time I sounded the names out slowly, like I was polishing each one. And each time the air relaxed as if the names themselves were exhibits that needed care. I stopped wondering who I was speaking for. I understood I wasn't alone here, even when I couldn't see anyone. On some nights, the reflection in the front doors showed not just me, but a crowd, clear enough I could tell they were paying attention. I never looked behind me. It was enough to know the room was full and calm. I learned one more rule. If I lingered in one gallery too long, small things began to shift elsewhere, labels tilting, ropes wandering, frames drifting. The museum disliked neglect spread unevenly. It wanted every room checked again and again in the right order. When I followed that rhythm, the building ran smooth. When I cut corners, it let me know. The last time I tested the rule, I skipped the children's corner to finish early. The doll fell. The small bell rang. A line of tiny chairs had turned their backs while I was gone. I set them right and said, I'm here. The PA clicked. Thank you for your visit. You're welcome, I said, and knew I meant it. Now my shift has a shape I trust. At 10 I walk and listen. At midnight I stand under the front hall speaker and say, closed, even though the recording says it for me. At 2 I take the list card and do what it asks. At 3 I read names, slow and careful, from whatever the museum sets in front of me. At 4 I check locks and cases, and the one rope that loves to wander. At 5 I tidy the front desk, line up brochures and breathe in that strange, steady feeling of a place that remains itself. At 6 I hand the ring of keys back to the manager and go home while the city wakes. Some mornings, as I leave, I touch the brass plaque by the stairs. It is warm, like a hand has just been there. Once, when I looked closely, I thought I saw a new line at the bottom, where donor names run out. Night attendant, it said, with no dates, just a small dash as if the second number will be filled in later. I didn't press my fingers over it. I didn't need to. I already know I belong to the list the way a label belongs to a case. I am not trapped. I am kept. If I ever don't show up, I think the museum will continue without me. The PA will play the closing message, then the rope will find the tape marks by itself. A new ring of keys will hang on a new belt. A new night attendant will walk the rows, and the building will teach them the rules the way it taught me. Until then, I keep the labels straight. I keep the names in my mouth. I keep the cases closed and the doors firm and the rope where it belongs. When I finish the last round before dawn, I stand in the front hall and say what the building once said, in my own voice and for my own reasons. Thank you for visiting. The museum is now closed. Please proceed to the exit. Do not touch the exhibits. return audio guides to the front desk, and from the speakers above me and the glass around me and the frames and cases and old wood and small careful tags on strings, I hear the answer that tells me the work is done. Present.